Let's talk about inflation. You know, that invisible force that just seems to chip away at the value of your money day in and day out? Well, what if I told you there's a clear playbook for dealing with it? And not just from anyone, but from maybe the greatest investor of all time, Warren Buffett. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to unpack his framework for not just surviving, but actually thriving when prices are on the rise. You ever get that feeling? You're working hard, you're trying to put money away, but it feels like you're running on a treadmill. Well, that's inflation. It's working against you 24/7, making every single dollar you save worth a little bit less. It's a real, genuine threat to your financial goals. So, what's the game plan? How do we fight back? Well, Buffett gives us this really powerful way to think about it, an investment pyramid. And to really understand what works best, we're going to start at the very bottom with the absolute worst things you can own, and we're going to climb our way, step by step, all the way to the top. All right, let's start right at the foundation of the pyramid. This is the stuff that gets absolutely demolished when inflation is running hot. This is where you do not want to be. So what's the number one worst thing to hold? It's probably not going to surprise you. It's the currency that's actually being inflated. We're talking cash stuffed under a mattress, money sitting in a savings account earning next to nothing. All of it is losing its buying power with every passing day. And this isn't just about physical dollars. It also includes things like bonds. And Buffett has this perfect analogy for it. He says holding cash during high inflation is like playing that card game, Old Maid. You're just sitting there with a losing card in your hand. Everybody at the table knows it's a loser, and you're just desperately trying to pass it on to someone else before the music stops. Now, this is where it gets really sneaky. You might think, well, bonds are safe, they pay interest. But look at this. Let's say you buy a bond and it pays you a 10% return. In a normal world, that's fantastic. You're 10% richer. But if inflation is also 10%, what's your real return? It's zero, a big fat nothing. You got your $10, sure, but everything you want to buy now costs 10% more. You've been running as fast as you can just to stay in the same place. Okay, let's climb up one level on our pyramid. Here we find what are called unproductive assets. Now, you know what I'm talking about. Gold, maybe some fancy art, collectibles. They're definitely better than cash, but, and this is a big but, they have a huge fundamental flaw. I absolutely love this visual from Buffett. He says, imagine you took every single ounce of gold in the entire world and melted it down into one giant cube. It would be massive, almost 70 feet on each side. You could look at it, you could polish it, you could even build a house on top of it. But what does it do? Nothing. It will never produce anything. It just sits there. And that's the key right there. A bar of gold might hold its value against inflation. It's a store of value, sure, but it's not going to make you any wealthier. It doesn't create anything. So to make a profit from it, you're not betting on the gold itself. You're betting that in the future, someone else will be more scared than you are and will pay you more for it. You're basically betting on future panic. There's a famous economic idea for this called the Keynesian beauty contest. It's wild. The idea is you don't win by picking the contestant you think is the most beautiful. No, you win by picking who you think everyone else will vote for. It gets even crazier. You really win by guessing what the average person thinks the average person will pick. It's a mind-bending guessing game, and it is almost impossible to win over and over again. Okay, we've officially reached the middle of the pyramid, and this is where we start talking about productive assets, actual businesses. But here's the thing. As Buffett always says, not all businesses are created equal, especially not when inflation is hitting hard. So let's start with the mediocre ones. So let me introduce you to Johnny. Johnny has a pretty simple business. He spends $1,000 on chewing gum inventory. Over the course of the year, he sells it all for $1,100, and at the end, he gets to pocket a nice $100 profit. That's a 10% return. Seems straightforward, right? And then, bam, 10% inflation hits. So Johnny goes back to his supplier to restock for the next year. But that same inventory that cost him $1,000 last year, it now costs him $1,100. It eats up his entire sales revenue, so his take-home profit for the year is zero. Gone. Just to stay in the exact same place. And Johnny's gum business, that's the textbook example of a mediocre business in an inflationary world. Why? Well, it's a cash-eating machine. It requires more and more capital just to tread water. He probably can't raise his prices that much without his customers walking away. And to top it all off, businesses like this often hold a lot of cash, which, as we already know, is the worst place to be. All right, now we're getting to the good stuff. We're getting near the top of the pyramid. Let's flip the script and contrast Johnny's struggling business with the kind of great businesses that can actually thrive when inflation is high. Okay, so now meet Wendy. Wendy also starts with $1,000, but instead of buying gum, she uses it to produce a song. She puts it up on Spotify, and every year it generates $100 for her in royalties. Now, on the surface, it looks the same as Johnny's business, a 10% return, but the underlying model is completely different. Let's put them head to head. When that 10% inflation hits, it's a total disaster for Johnny. His costs go up and his cash flow evaporates. But what about Wendy? Her song was a one-time investment. She doesn't have to reinvest another penny. In fact, inflation might even increase the amount she gets paid in royalties. 100% of her revenue is pure profit she can take home. So what's the secret sauce here? Well, a great business is the total opposite of Johnny's. It requires very little ongoing capital. It has what Buffett calls pricing power. Think about a strong brand or a piece of software that people just can't live without. They can raise prices and customers will pay. And get this, they can even use debt to their advantage because inflation makes the money they have to pay back in the future worth less. Okay, here we are. We've climbed past the terrible stuff like cash, the speculative stuff like gold, and even the truly great businesses. We have finally made it to the absolute peak of Buffett's inflation-proof pyramid. So after all of that, what is it? What is the one single asset that stands above everything else as the ultimate protection against rising prices? It's you. The single best investment you can possibly make is in yourself. And the logic behind this is actually really simple and really beautiful. Think about it. Any skills you learn, any education you get, you pay for it today, in old dollars. But the value those skills provide, the salary you can demand, that earning power keeps pace with inflation in current dollars. Making yourself more valuable is the ultimate inflation hedge. It's an asset that can't be taxed and can't be inflated away. So let's recap the whole playbook. Step 1 at the bottom. Stay away from cash and bonds. Step 2, one level up, be really careful with assets that don't produce anything and just rely on speculation. Step 3, find those amazing capital-light Wendy businesses that have real pricing power. And step 4, the most important rule of all, the absolute best thing you can do is invest in yourself. And we'll just end on this classic piece of wisdom from the man himself. You know, it's a great reminder to focus on what you can actually control, building real value in businesses, and more importantly, in yourself, and not to panic about the rest. If Buffett can stay optimistic after all these years, surely we can all handle a little inflation.